to young people, but they won't take them. Bill Gates, the mind behind Microsoft, grew up in a highly privileged household, but he grabbed access to opportunities that he had. So did Leonard Bernstein, the great conductor. Now, he had two unbelievably lucky opportunities. One was that he had asthma, which isn't so great, but because he had asthma, he was not able to go into the military during World War II. And so all the big musicians had been drafted into the armed forces, and this spot as the assistant director of the New York Philharmonic became open. Unbelievable, opportunity. And then the second was that one of the visiting conductors became ill. So he was asked to step to the podium, and he did brilliantly, and that started his job. So that was one of those things of taking chance opportunity and capitalizing on it. Social skills are also essential for building teams or getting supporters. Psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi followed artists for 20 years after graduating from art school. He realized that artists who were able to talk to and engage buyers, critics, and agents through good social skills were the most successful. So, of course, you have to be a good artist to even have a show, but then if you want people to buy your work, you also have to have good social skills. So lesson 3, talent development is short and long-term. And my original title was a long one, and so I keep kind of repeating this theme that talent development process involves a series of transitions from abilities to competencies, competencies to expertise, and beyond. And each requires greater commitment of effort, practice, study, and motivation. And some kids get stuck at stages of the process. We all know, as I said, heartbreaking stories, the brilliant writer who lost motivation because the competition seemed overwhelming, or because she didn't want to give up time with friends, or because she needed to make money for her family. As you can see, the psychological skills are the levers for the whole process, and the good thing is that they are malleable. We heard about the use of the word malleable. This is not, everyone has different levels of psychosocial skills, but they are teachable. This list comes from a study conducted by sports psychologists on the psychosocial skills taught to North American adolescents in Olympic training. So I'm giving you the chance to look at this. As we can see, coaches do everything possible to anticipate disappointment, performance fear, and loss of motivation. I want to point out a couple of them that are especially interesting to me. One is coachability. And I found it interesting because in the Juilliard study, one of the variables that came up often was teachability, because there were students who were brilliant when they auditioned, and then the teachers found that they didn't want to learn anything. So they came in because they wanted to get a degree from Juilliard, but they had no interest in getting anything from the process. They just wanted to be anointed. And so coachability is an explicit being receptive to improving. Automaticity. In sport and music, automaticity is personified by what one young man told me, that he practiced until the performance he wanted was in his nervous system. And then a bomb could drop next door and he could still perform as he wanted to. So once the technical parts were in his nervous system, he could focus on expressiveness and nuance. How many of our academically gifted students are coached in dealing with stress and adversity? Instead of trying to reduce the incidence of these factors which appear in real life, we need to help young people see that adversity is normal and can often be handled with thought and with grace. What are some base level psychological skills? They're certainly related to one another, and some of them have been mentioned this morning. Intrinsic motivation helps with persistence. Once a person gets to conservatory or to a talent search program or to MIT, they realize how challenging it is to be successful in that career. They get used to hard times because it seems as if everyone's having them. It's getting lazy during the good times that can be really problematic or dangerous. I need to note here that intrinsic motivation can be developed. Sometimes we're first motivated to learn or to work hard at something by the desire to please someone rather than the pure pleasure. These extrinsic reasons may change once a child is captured by the pleasure he or she gets by being good at something and delving deeply into an area. Why do some people not appear motivated? How many of you have experienced this? Young people who lose motivation when they first encounter others who are also very gifted. Suddenly they question their true abilities. Others lose motivation when they realize they have to work hard at something to be good at it. If their schoolwork or curriculum has not been challenging, then they may not have ever had to work hard before. Others may not see the purpose to what they're doing or how their learning is relevant to achieving their goal. Finally, and tragically, gifted youngsters may be surrounded by peers who discourage their deep interests or commitments to things intellectual or artistic. At my high school, I went to a magnet high school. We would argue about how many hours we studied. This is a very much a rarity in a U.S. public school. In fact, Professor Tannenbaum, who I mentioned earlier, conducted a study of all the New York City high schools and showed that students in the U.S. admire brilliance, but only when it's dissociated with studiousness. That's quite a conundrum. Our colleague, Professor David Dye, whom you'll be hearing from, framed many of these issues very well. He tied these feelings and behaviors we've all witnessed with beliefs about giftedness. And these beliefs are organized around a motivational principle called mindsets, developed by Stanford professor Carol Dweck. One view of giftedness is that gifts represent who a person is. This is what Carol Dweck calls an entity view of intelligence. The other view is that your abilities are malleable and that they're meant to be developed over time. She calls this a growth mindset. Now let's apply mindset theory to the students we talked about who don't appear motivated. Those with a fixed mindset who believe that their success is due to their abilities are not likely to expose themselves to failure or looking less able. Failure can crush their sense of self. Those with a growth mindset who believe that their abilities need to develop and grow understand that they must push themselves, and this might require working hard and resisting peer pressure. Dweck has shown that mindsets can change. We can help these changes by how we use praise. Instead of praising smartness, praise good strategies, commitment, persistence, or hard work, whichever is most appropriate. We can also help young people understand that life involves facing problems and setbacks, and that we all do that every day, and that most problems can be solved by thinking creatively with new strategies, or sometimes just trying over and over. She suggests that this message can be conveyed without lectures, but by sharing everyday problem-solving strategies with children at the dinner table or informally at school. So in other words, saying, wow, you know, I had a really difficult problem at work and this is how we figured it out, just to share that this is normal life and that you deal with setbacks. Sometimes you're not successful, but then you find another strategy. Another important factor, a psychological factor, is a sense of belonging. We just talked about the importance of a peer group. A sense of belonging has shown to be a great motivator for optimal performance. That is, when you feel comfortable in a group and you know you're respected, it's easier to perform well. Now, there is some research that I find fascinating that shows that a great deal of wonderful ideas were created by people who didn't feel like they belonged, and they created ideas out of rage. I'll show you. So that is a motivator, but it's not necessarily very healthy. And Professor Mihai Csikszentmihalyi also wrote about this and said that the difference between those who were motivated by I'll show you, and those who are doing it more positively is that those who do it for I'll show you are never satisfied. So in other words, they'll do something great and then the feeling, the need is so great that they just immediately feel bad again. And they can't enjoy their own creativity. Sometimes everything is going right, so much so that you feel like you can let things slide and lose discipline. Beyond a needed break, vacation, and attendance to family or home obligations, haven't we all gone and been lazy at one time or another? Haven't we gotten distracted when we grab at short-term rather than long-term gratification? For many of us, delayed gratification is extremely difficult, but we have developed techniques for dealing with it. For children, it can be extremely challenging. A famous study was conducted in the 1960s and early 70s led by psychologist Walter Mischel, whereby a child was offered a choice between one small reward, sometimes called a marshmallow, sometimes a marshmallow, but often a cookie or a pretzel, either provided immediately or told that they would get two if they waited approximately 15 minutes. I mean, they weren't told 15 minutes, but they were told if they waited. The results were astonishing. Even years later, the difference between the group that waited and didn't wait was the differences were evident in physical health, academic achievement, to involvement with the justice system. Recent replication studies have shown that it's easier for children to delay gratification, however, when they have distraction strategies. So such as having an egg timer or some way that they can measure the passage of time. Or if they have other things to do in the room besides just sitting there with the marshmallow in front of them. And it's very entertaining. You can see on YouTube the original and then some of the replications. These pictures are from the children. You can see the girl could not resist. And the boy was wondering whether he would or not. Some other important variables that are developed later that I just want to mention. One is restoring self-confidence. So a lot of times kids come in and they're very confident, and then they become less confident when they see other kids who are as talented or more talented. But then as you become go into your career, even if you haven't solved that problem and you're not